Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to the channel on a very special day because today, April 20th, is the 10th anniversary of this channel. That's right, I have been making movie reviews and other content on this channel for 10 years. It still feels unreal. I look at all the content I made in that decade and go, I did all that. I made all of that. It still blows my mind that I've accomplished all of that and that it's gotten me to certain places. So it's been a hell of a decade on this channel. And in honor of this milestone, I'm going to check off a bucket list that some of you have been requesting for me to do. I honestly would have liked to do something a little more positive and something that shows my love of movies, but a lot of you have been requesting this, and I've been meaning to do a revised version of this list for some time, so why not kill two birds with one stone? So let's just get this started. This is my revised definitive edition list of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Now, for those of you who have been subscribed to this YouTube channel since the beginning, you know that I already made a video like this back as my 100th video. Oh boy, was that an early stage in the channel. But in the past 10 years since that video came out, I've seen a lot more movies, and I just figured, you know what? I'm not satisfied with that original list. I have seen things that would easily bump off some movies that were on that list originally. This is still my own personal opinion, and any movie that got bumped off the previous list, I have not turned around on. I have not looked at those with fresh eyes and now like them. It's just I've now seen far worse. Now, the criteria for this list is as follows. They have to be movies that are completely inept when it comes to filmmaking, just the simple tactics of making a movie. They also can't be movies that are so bad they're enjoyable. They might have sprinkles of things that you can watch and laugh at, but on a whole, you just want the movie to end. And the movie simply can't be boring either. It either has to be torturous to watch or straight up insulting. And that's exactly what all 10 movies in this list consist of. I'm not doing a top 100 worst of list. There is no way in hell I am doing that. I had a great time doing my top 100 favorite movies series as part of my 5th anniversary on this channel, but I can't go that far with the worst of list. I can only pick 10 movies because I'd rather focus my time talking about the stuff that I like rather than the stuff that I hate. But enough setup. Let's jump right into this list, starting with number 10. Catwoman. Quite possibly the single worst comic book movie ever made. I saw this for the first time during quarantine, during the 2020 pandemic. That's how desperate things got. And I wanted to review that in Supergirl and prep for Wonder Woman 1984. But the point is, I never imagined I'd be watching this movie, and holy crap, is it crap. There's a weird sexual energy to it that isn't at all attractive like Catwoman in other incarnations, but it's more like Showgirls, where it's just unappealing to watch. Halle Berry is really all over the place and takes a lot of inspiration from Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman in Batman Returns, but not in a good way. Sharon Stone is a terrible villain. The CG is garbage. It's just a fascinatingly bad movie, and it might have some entertainment value to it, but it is completely inept, and might possibly be the worst comic book movie ever made. I mean, Josh Trank's Fantastic Four is up there as well, but this movie is just more fascinatingly bad than boring bad, the way Fan Four Stick was. Number 9. Battlefield Earth. Again, much like with Catwoman, I saw this movie for the first time during the lockdowns when I was unemployed. There were no movies coming out in theaters, so I grew desperate. And I didn't think I'd end up watching both those movies in 1 year. But Battlefield Earth is, again, a truly special, inept piece of filmmaking. I can't quite tell you the parallels to Scientology because that's something I just don't want to mess with. But the story is poorly constructed, the acting's awful, especially from John Travolta as Turl. The CG is garbage. Every frame of this movie is done at a Dutch angle. And as a little side note, if you haven't seen my review, I do the entire review in a Dutch angle in celebration, I guess, if you want to call it that. But the point is, it's an awful movie. It is absolutely terrible, and the behind the scenes on how this movie got financed and the legal troubles the company got in because of its financing is legendary. And the fact that this movie doesn't even hit the 2-hour mark but feels like it's 3 hours is inexcusable. Like, that's the clear sign of a truly, truly terrible movie. This was originally my least favorite movie of all time right after seeing it, but I'll explain later why that has changed. Number 8. Birdemic, Shock and Terror. Now, in the original list that I made 10 years ago, this was actually number 1, because much like with Battlefield Earth, it was fresh in my mind right after seeing it going into that list. But, you know, time went on, things changed, I've had a difference in opinion in terms of what I think is the actual worst movie I've ever seen. There is something enjoyable about how awful it's put together. It's much like with The Room. The director of this movie really thought he was making something real. He was earnest about what he was trying to make. So in a way you have to give him props, but unlike The Room, this movie is shot like a YouTube video from 2008. At least with The Room, they were able to get industry-level equipment. It was a terrible movie at the end, but at least it looked like an actual movie. Again, this looks like a YouTube video from 2008, and it's torturous to watch if you watch it unriffed. The only way this can even be mildly enjoyed is if you're watching it through the riff tracks track, or if you decide to not watch it that way. Have lots of friends, lots of beer, lots of weed, you will laugh your ass off once the birds start attacking. But even then, it's a struggle to watch. Just watch Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds instead. Number 7. Disaster movie. If you weren't around during the 2010s, you probably weren't aware of how much of a big deal Scary Movie was. The Scary Movie series were dominant when it came to spoof movies, and they were the most popular ones, even though Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost were doing far better spoof movies in that decade. But the point is, the series got to a level of popularity that 2 of the 6 writers of the first movie, Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer, went off to make their own spoof movies. They made Date Movie, Epic Movie, Meet the Spartans, all of which are terrible, all of which are absolutely atrocious, but none of them are as shameless as Disaster Movie. Like the other movies these two have made, they attempt to take the basic idea of one specific movie. In Epic Movie's case, it was Chronicles of Narnia. In Meet the Spartans' case, it was 300. But they just filled in with all these pop culture references and characters from other properties without anything clever to say about them. They're just in the movie for recognizability. And this is actually the worst because you're not really sure what the plot of this movie is about. All the characters are obnoxious, the humor is terrible, and what makes this one even far more atrocious is that it's spoofing, and I use that term very generously, all movies that came out just months before this film came out. So they had no idea what was going to be big. You got Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Batman, Love Guru, which that wasn't even a hit in itself, so it just goes to show you that these people were like, oh, Mike Myers, Love Guru, that might be a hit, let's put that in our movie, and well, boy, did that backfire. It's awful. It is truly, truly dreadful. They'd make a couple of other movies afterwards, like Vampire Sucks. I think they did a Fast and Furious spoof, but they haven't gotten a theatrical release in a long time. And as far as I know, they aren't making movies anymore, so... oh boy, this movie's just dreadful. Number 6. Movie 43. Now, I've already talked about this movie before on the channel a couple times. It topped my list for the worst movies of 2013, 10 years ago, yikes. And it was number 2 in my picks for the worst movies of the last decade. But what makes this movie worse than something like Disaster Movie is that you have several A-list stars in this movie, whereas Disaster Movie barely had anyone. Like, the most recognizable people in that movie are Kim Kardashian, Carmen Electra, and I think Matt Lanter, who voices Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars. That's it. This movie has not only A-list stars, but people who have either been nominated for or won Academy Awards, like Kate Winslet, Emma Stone, Hugh Jackman, Naomi Watts. The list just goes on and on. It's stacked with A-list talent, which makes this movie far worse because it's so lazy, so incompetent, and just so insulting in terms of the sketches they're trying to do. It is a novel idea to try to do an anthology series of movies, and the hook is kind of clever, but when you really watch this movie, there's nothing clever about it, and oh boy, this movie was a struggle to get through. But like I said earlier, it was only number 2 in my picks for the worst movies of the last decade, meaning the number 1 pick is in this list. Speaking of which, number 5, Jack and Jill. Again, I talked about this in my worst of the decade list, so I don't need to go into full detail, but it's the movie that South Park made a parody trailer of before the movie even came out. It was conceived to be a joke, and it's just a terrible Adam Sandler movie. Next to 8 Crazy Nights, it might be the worst of his movies. Having Adam Sandler play his twin sister, who's just a completely obnoxious human being, is cliche, it's tiring. It was maybe acceptable for the late 90s, but not the early 2010s. Getting Al Pacino to play himself and fall for Adam Sandler's Jill is just embarrassing to watch. There's nothing else I have to say about this movie that hasn't been said in my worst of the decade list, only that thank God for Tarantino and Scorsese for putting Al Pacino in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Irishman, and luckily these horrible Adam Sandler comedies are not theatrically released. At least we don't have to suffer through these movies in theaters. Number 4, Jaws the Revenge, aka Jaws 4. Now, this movie might not be as bad as something like Birdemic, Disaster Movie, or maybe Jack and Jill for some of you, and I can see that, but I have my reasons for why Jaws the Revenge is this low on the list. The obvious one is that it's the 3rd sequel to one of the greatest movies ever made. Jaws is a masterpiece of cinema, and we all know it. Jaws 2 is incredibly flawed but fun. Jaws 3D is the so bad it's good Jaws movie. This movie is so bad it's insulting. There's a lot throughout this movie where it's a boring melodrama, but the points that make this movie truly insulting is when it tries to tie in with the first Jaws movie. It rips off scenes and even shots from that original film. The plot's preposterous, with the shark wanting to get revenge on the Brodies, so it follows Ellen and Mike from Massachusetts all the way down to the Bahamas and gets there first. The level of special effects is inexcusable, from the horrible looking shark that barely moves, from the finale where the shark blows up, and I've said this before, I swear I'm not making this up, it really looks like they made that shark out of Play-Doh, and then they built the boat out of popsicle sticks and shot that sequence in a bathtub. Like, it really looks like that if you go frame by frame. It is truly insulting. It's a terrible, terrible movie all around. I did a commentary on this with my brother, and I reviewed this movie in 2014 for Shark Week. It's a terrible movie all around. There's a reason why this is considered one of the worst movies ever made, and considering that it's one of the follow-ups to one of the greatest movies ever made, that really knocks it down a lot. Number 3, The Cat in the Hat. I'm on record for not liking Jim Carrey's The Grinch. I know I feel like I'm in the minority in that when it comes to my generation, but it's a movie that I don't like, but I don't fault anyone for liking it. I think anyone can agree that this is awful. Like, even if you're the biggest defender of Ron Howard's Grinch movie, you can't defend this adaptation of The Cat in the Hat. It is insulting, it is just mean-spirited, full of adult humor that does not belong in a Dr. Seuss adaptation. Mike Myers does not have the same level of charisma as Jim Carrey when it comes to working through that makeup. There is a reason why they stopped making live-action adaptations of Dr. Seuss books, because this one is just that bad, that insulting. There are some moments where you can laugh at it, but it's just more degrading and insulting than it is laughably bad. Number 2. Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. 5 years ago, after The Predator came out and I finally was able to review the AVP films, I did a full-on rant with this movie. And I still stand by my statement that it's my second least favorite movie of all time, because it rips off everything that we love from the previous Alien and Predator movies to the point where it actually creates holes in the plot. It's murky, it looks like crap, it seems like they cut the budget in the lighting department because you can't see anything that's going on. The practical effects work on the aliens is a joke. Like, they look terrible, they move all stiff-like, and the characters are absolute dirtbags. I don't like any character in this entire movie. They're boring, they're moronic. Much like with Jaws the Revenge, it makes the cardinal sin for coming off of not one, not two, but 3 of the greatest science fiction movies ever made. Alien, Aliens, and Predator are all masterpieces. And yes, the rest of the franchise has not held up to those standards, except for last year's Prey. But to take those 3 iconic films and basically de-evolve the franchise into a low-rate slasher movie from the 2000s is just terrible. It's insulting, and I'm glad that there were no Alien vs. Predator follow-ups after this. Will they try again now that both Alien and Predator are under Disney's ownership? I don't know, but honestly, I don't think they should, because again, like with Jaws the Revenge, you make something this terrible, and we don't easily forget that. This is a movie that's so terrible, you can still smell it 16 years later. And I think the Alien and Predator series are better off separated in movies. Cross them over in video games and comics, that's fine, but in movies, no thank you. Number 1. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. You might not be surprised by this pick at all, or maybe you are, because Birdemic was number 1 in my original list, and Battlefield Earth was initially the worst movie I'd seen when I first saw it 3 years ago. But with each of those movies, after I declared them to be the worst movies I've ever seen, I always thought back on my time seeing Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen in theaters, and I thought, no, this is still the worst I've ever seen. I could tell you why this movie is terrible. I could tell you why this is my least favorite movie of all time, regardless of everything else I've seen. But that is an entire rant on its own that I do not have time for in this video. I actually did plan to review Michael Bay's Transformers movies in prep for Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, which means I'll be reviewing Revenge of the Fallen. So I'm sorry to end this video on an anticlimactic note, but I think it's better that I save my true opinions and my really harsh thoughts on Revenge of the Fallen for the review. I originally wanted to do this series of reviews in May, but I think I'm actually going to be pushing them to mid to late June after Rise of the Beasts come out. I know that might be disappointing for some of you because you don't get to see me suffer through these movies earlier, but I just need more mental time to prep myself, especially with Revenge of the Fallen. And plus, reviewing these movies around the same month that they came out in theaters might be a little more appropriate than in May. I have a special review coming out in May in honor of the anniversary of another movie, so don't worry, I've got you covered. But with Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, you're gonna have to wait until June to hear my full thoughts on why this is the worst movie I've ever seen. And there you go, those are my picks for my 10 least favorite movies of all time. Thank you all for watching, and thank you to those who have been subscribed to this channel since the beginning. I'm enormously proud of what I've been able to accomplish on this channel and just how I've evolved when it comes to reviewing movies and talking about movies in general. I managed to collaborate with a lot of amazing people throughout the course of this channel, even if I appeared on their channels. I managed to become friends with a lot of these amazing people. I joined the Hollywood Critics Association. It really has been a great experience doing this for 10 years, and I'm not stopping. Here's to the next 10 years, and hopefully it'll be bigger and better than the past 10 years have been. Thank you once again for watching this video and watching the past 10 years of this channel. And now I want to know what you guys think about my picks for my least favorite movies ever. If you've seen any of them, what do you think? What are your least favorite movies of all time personally? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, have a good day, take care of yourselves, happy 10-year anniversary to this YouTube channel.